Yo, my peoples, what's up? Welcome to Shelf Stories, the channel that tells tales from games, books, and life. I am your host, Jason. Thank you so much for stopping by for this latest episode of Good Trouble. This is the series where I attempt to engage in necessary conversations in the board gaming space in a spirit of education and compassion. So this episode is a follow-up to my last one entitled Two Types of Racism. That was I got a lot of engagement out of that, a lot more than I thought I would. Thank you so much for people who responded in the comments, private chats, all that kind of thing. What I like to do when it comes to those think pieces is publish a follow-up, answer some of those questions, engage the community in a dialogue and some of the critical questions that emerged. You know, people have real thoughts about this stuff. So, this is my opportunity to say, A, thank you, and B, offer some responses to hopefully continue dialogue along. If Shelf Stories is about anything, it's about stories, obviously, and also conversations. So a couple of things. Normally I would have named this kind of part 2, but as I was putting the episode together, something bigger emerged, kind of a bigger vision for what I think we all want the board gaming space to be, which is accountability and empathy. So I'm going to split the episode into those two parts, and I'm going to cover what I mean by those two. Heads up, this is a difficult conversation, just like the last episode, so there's going to be a little bit of explicit language, so just please be advised that that is coming. So the first concept we're going to talk about is accountability, and in a lot of ways, so much of the discussion is around what do we mean by that? What's going on with accountability? So I'm not going to go into the whole thing. You watched the last video in terms of, someone made a comment or the comment got out into the community. A lot of people were offended. And it's like, how do we get that back? What does the person have to do in order to really get back in people's good graces, calm them down, all that kind of thing? And the answer is accountability. The answer is, some kind of restoration has to happen. So it's a question of, what does it look like? And I'm going to quote listener Matt Nath, who articulates the confusion at least for himself, I think pretty well. He says, you may not mean anything bad by accountability, but when what's been done isn't enough, what more is there to do? The only thing left is something bad, which makes the calls for accountability sound threatening. You say that, and I hear, say only what we want when we want it, or we'll attack and harass you, we'll remove your funding, block your channel, and stop you from making more videos, because who knows when you might say another thing we deem offensive. Bow to the altar of social justice. I put that last part in there, but it's kind of the spirit of the issue, right? So accountability sounds threatening, right? Like it's kind of a euphemism for blood or something, some kind of pound of flesh that we want on the aggrieved side, so to speak. So in order to properly answer that question, I need to pull from two different places. First of all, I was a social worker. I worked in criminal justice for a number of years, and I want to pull from ideas of restoration, justice, and mercy from my work in the larger culture there. A second one, I want to pull from actually psychology and group dynamics, not necessarily from race. It plays out along racial lines, and I'll talk all about that in a second. But I think in terms of psychologically, I think we have a bias towards familiarity. And this bias towards familiarity leads us to set up two tiers of justice and restoration. There is the rules that work in the in-group, and there's the rules that work in between groups. So the short story is going to be that amongst the in-group, people where there's a lot of familiarity, then we're going to be okay with words and emotions and expressions, that kind of thing. But when you're talking about ruptures between groups, different types of people, then the ruptures tend to be bigger, and more needs to be done. Words and emotions are not generally enough. You kind of have to back it up with some kind of action. So that's the really short version, but let me tell you a story to articulate the point. So this is going to be a little bit longer a video because I'm going into a little story, but sorry. Fast forward a couple minutes if you don't want to hear the story. So this is from when I was a social worker in an alternative to incarceration program. That means that we would work with juvenile offenders, and in America, the juvenile offenders are usually black, gang involved, that kind of thing. And we would, try to keep them out of jail. We try to keep them involved in programs, and they have to come to our, building and stay busy, and restore them, without having to go through the prisons. So I spent a lot of time in court, advocating, talking to lawyers, talking to judges, that kind of thing, letting them know what the kid was doing, and whether they could be safely returned to the streets and all that kind of thing. So then I go. This one day, I'm there with my supervisors right next to me in the back row of the court. It's like a 5-row thing, and then the lawyers' desks, and then the bench with the judge. And, if you've ever been to one of these scenarios, it's a lot of cases, just one after the other. And one of my kids comes in, and he's looking fresh, like a shirt and tie and, fresh cut, but he's sullen, not very expressive at all. Goes to sit down, and at that point, his mom, who's, kind of being emotional anyway, just pipes up, doesn't let things proceed. Oh, please, let go of my son. He's not like him. It's his first offense. Don't take him away. He's already been away from our family long enough, and just on and on and on. Just can't hold it back. So the judge, looks at her and says, ma'am, if you're having trouble holding your emotions together, then we can escort you out and help you get taken care of. And while we continue with the proceedings, bailiff, could you help her out? So the bailiff comes, picks her up, guides her out, takes her out into the hallway. It's very, gentle. It's not a threatening thing, at least on the surface of it. So then, they go through the back and forth, and the kid's just stole an iPhone. Most of these kids are, up for some kind of robbery. And then, it's like, okay, well, we're going to have to remand you, we'll go to the facility, and then, come back and we'll continue this. So gets taken away. So then, more cases come. A little bit later, a white kid comes in, and the white kid, very sullen, a very emotional, red faced, and the hair is all mussy and everything. And mom is also there. Mom is there just a lot of emotions in the room at that point. And, so the mom again, oh, please, my son is, can't, just can't you see, he doesn't mean badly, and he got caught up and all that stuff. And the son is like, so please, I regret everything, just whatever I got to do in order to, get back to my family and everything. I'll do whatever it takes. So then the judge says, okay, we'll look at the case. You can go home with your mom today, and then you come back, and we'll continue this another time. So kid stands up with the lawyer, walks out. Now I'm watching this, and I let out a big, "What the fuck was that?" My supervisor, I swear to you, she's like, shh, shh, shh. The entire court. I think it was the entire court. I remember the lawyers specifically turning around at their desk going, what was that outburst? And eventually, shh, everybody calm down. And I avoided I kind of dodged a bullet there. Everybody just calm down. But my face, I have this face like I just saw a ham sandwich just stand up on 2 legs and walk out. I'm shocked. And my supervisor, she's looking at me with just this mix of, she's laughing a little bit to herself, but she's also exasperated. And she a lot of emotion on her face too. And she finally just kind of gets serious and says, Jason, you work in criminal justice. This shit happens all of the time. So get used to it. So the low-key most important part of that story is the fact that the black defendant had no emotions. While the white defendant spoke and had all the emotional signs, messed up hair, and the red face. Why is that? Because of the idea of 2 tiers of justice. And again, I think that it's more useful to talk about this in terms of psychology and group dynamics. I'll have another video about that in, after this one that drills down on that. But for now, know that where there's familiarity, where there is connection, whether it's, a race or familiar or something like that, then words and emotionality are more accepted as redress for injuries. It's fine. That kid knew, and the mom knew. It's like, I just gave it a shot, and so happened that this was, they hit the jackpot. They were able to go out. Every POC knows on some level that if we commit some kind of infraction, then we're not going to be able to talk our way out of it or cry our way out of it. We got some stuff in front of us. That kid, he was 13 years old. He knew, and he didn't waste his time. He didn't waste his tears. He just sat there and took it. He knew it was coming. And if you don't believe me, well, then I was there, and I could barely believe it myself. Still, 5-6 years after the fact. But, just look at the stats, look at the justice stats. I can only speak for here in America. It's what we talk about when we talk about kind of a differential justice system. So where there is that distance, and that's what I'm talking about with Ticini. There's a big distance between Ticini as a white European successful designer of games and American POC who got cheesed off. That's a big rupture. We don't identify in the same groups except as like gamers, but racially and culturally in different ways, just there's no connection there. We wanted the same. I think we wanted the words and emotionality, just this wasn't going to cut it. We wanted action. And if you want to know what accountability is, accountability equals action. Accountability does not equal someone's scalp. It means that along with the words and the emotionality, actions would have really helped. So examples, what could have been some action? So, reach out immediately to offended industry people who are POCs, and there's plenty of them to choose from. So just reach out, kind of begin the conversational process of healing. You design games in the Mesoamerican culture. Why not involve them more? So indigenous peoples who can be your graphic designers, your concept designers, or something like that. Scholarships and things, real proceeds from sold games goes to certain organizations. There's so many things that could be done in concert with the people who are offended. A conversation with them, things emerge from that. That's what we wanted. Take our word for it. That's what we wanted. Maybe there was a really loud contingent yelling the R word and all that. But if you really dug into the comments and the people that were just really hurt and aggrieved, it was mostly just sadness and hurt. It wasn't just anger, even though the anger was the most front-facing thing. I think some combination of an apology, verbal apology, plus commitment to action, plus time to see if those actions had actually borne out would have done the trick. I think that's what I mean by accountability. Accountability equals actions. Talk to us and see if that's what we really mean by accountability. All right, so a subset of the accountability piece is how to apologize. Speaking of apologies, I apologize for this video being long. I ended up having a lot to say, so please bear with me. Thank you. All right, a commenter FWJ777 asks, another topic I like to see is how to apologize. I'm humble enough to acknowledge that most of the apologies I read seem good enough for me, but then there's usually a firestorm of that apology was not good enough, and the rules seem clouded to me. I'll try not to take too much time here. Own the impact. There is going to be that natural reflexive tendency. I think, again, very, very human. I didn't mean it. I'm a good person. I didn't mean it. And amongst that familiar space, whether it's familiarity of race or culture or family or anything, I think that's going to fly a little bit more. It all depends on circumstances, but I think it has more of a chance of working in that scenario than between groups where there's a big gap. And we're talking culturally, right? We're talking like cultural apologies, the apologies in the public square. So, what are we talking about? So it's usually, the whites are in the dominant space, but then, between white and black, white and Latino, Latina, white and Arabic, Jewish, the different groups that make up this beautiful multicultural space, or, maybe not multicultural, between man and woman, or hetero and LGBTQ. Whenever there is a breach across all those gaps, the best bet is to just own the impact. The best bet is to listen and figure out what the impact was. Try not to kind of be in your own head and say, well, let me guess what the impact was. If it was me, then I would have, I wouldn't have been that hurt, so they couldn't have been that hurt either. You're going to want to listen, empty yourself out and listen, figure out what the actual impact was, just own it. And if your intention is good, then show that after. Don't tell us your intentions. Show your intentions. I think, obviously this isn't comprehensive, but I think that's on the path to the best kinds of apologies. Now, I didn't say that process was easy, but I think that's how to do it. All right, so that does it for accountability. Let's move on to my next topic, which is not empathy yet. I had to make a little space, right? Just because I wanted to acknowledge my European brothers and sisters. Thank you so much for engaging with the content. I love hearing from different perspectives, different peoples. So thank you very much. I hope we can continue our interactions. So the topic they want to talk about is cultural imperialism. And I picked a quote from Fab, a French POC, self-described. You militate for a multicultural global society, which is a beautiful idea and a great horizon. But by doing so, do you not see any weakness in the idea that one group has Americano-centric culture and they're imposing that worldview on other parts of the world that have different cultures and histories? I won't make a list, but too many times I've seen American POCs and white American so-called progressives apply their biased reasoning on European things and people. All right. I like, when we're in our American scenario and we have a hard time kind of seeing outside ourselves, it's nice to have different diverse voices hold a mirror up to this stuff, which is why I really much value and militate for that multicultural society, because that's part of it, right? Seeing the mirror, seeing what we're doing and seeing how we can do it better. But I'm not only American, I'm Puerto Rican. And what does European gaming culture have to say about my peoples and my island? You want to talk about cultural imperialism, right? This is a worldview that reduces my people to La Isla del Encanto, escapist fantasy, a nice, relaxing space where you can grow sugar and trade it around and build your trading empire, when meanwhile, I know exactly who was cutting that sugar. That's a challenge, but it's a challenge to the worldview. I very much recognize that I'm talking to people, not just the worldview. So now I hope we see each other. I hope that we see that cultural imperialism is multi-layered. There's a lot of different things to say. And from my perspective, I actually ask for your help. If you are a person that doesn't like cultural imperialism put upon you, then I ask you to recognize the fact that I don't like it put upon me and my people either. Help me out. I want to reach out to the publishers. Let's get a different version of Puerto Rico, a better version of Puerto Rico, a better version of all these games. Because at the end of the day, who wants to enter into that space of cultural imperialism and oppression? We're playing games. And I think there's a way to have awesome games if we really work together and hash some of this stuff out. So I didn't even do that on purpose. But that last part where I ended the last section about, me caring about them caring about me, that leads to the last section I want to talk about here, which is empathy. So empathy, the ability to share and understand one another's feelings. And I will use a quote to illustrate my point from More Coffee. Hi, More Coffee. Promised that I would respond, and here I go. So in the case of DT, Daniele Ticini, there was no intention to be hurtful, yet he gets treated like someone who was. Several publishers and social media personalities break off all ties with him, etc., etc. In my opinion, that's awful behavior. It does not work towards greater mutual understanding and respect. Being frustrated is, in my opinion, not an excuse to behave with narrow-mindedness and a quick temper towards people of other cultures. Basically an empathy argument. Have empathy for this man. Have empathy for the fact that publishers are breaking off with him. His good name is tarred. You know, there's a lot in that, et cetera, right? And a lot of people made that kind of type of argument where it's like, you know, feel what this man is feeling. How does it feel to be called a racist when you're not a racist? And all these other things, right? What I kind of imagine in my mind's eye is someone who has like a bottle, and that bottle is full of empathy, and the empathy is for, you know, DT, and they're talking to people who lack empathy. So it's like, here, have some empathy for this. I'm going to pour some empathy out for you, and, you know, please feel more for this man who is unjustly being accosted and everything. So that would be fine, but you're not talking to people who lack empathy. As a matter of fact, we are overflowing with empathy ourselves, but it's for a different person. Danielle Tassini is one end, at the end of the day, a successful white Italian designer. And there is a gay Asian man who received racial slurs and threats against his person. And not the only time that has happened, it just so happened to be the time that he posts. And there are a lot of people who are on my side who, when we speak up, whether we're speaking up, you know, really loudly, or whether we're just kind of doing what I'm doing, which is trying to be reasonable and kind, we get that over the top response of harassment and threat and fear and intimidation. Take my word for it. Not all of us go public. God bless Danny for going public with it, but that is the tip of the iceberg of what we experience. And that's where our empathy bottles are. And the funny thing is that I put it in the video. Like I started at the beginning of the video with the tweet, the really nasty one, and the racism one. And at the end of the video, they bookended. They're right there. And yet the people who are defending Tassini it just didn't go there. They just didn't talk about it. Their empathy bottle is full. There's no room. So when you focus that, your empathy bottle is full of feeling for one person, then it gets so full that you don't even notice the other side of what's going on. And I'm definitely willing to allow that we have some full empathy bottles go all around. So like, it's almost like we're a bunch of people trying to pour empathy into each other's bottles that are full. And it's kind of like silly to imagine when you kind of take it out. There's a lot of spilled empathy. And what does spilled empathy look like? Frustration, anger, all the stuff that we're experiencing. Not from lack of empathy, but from trying to overfill each other's empathy, which is focused on different things. And so just to get back to the comment, I think that what the comment said was that there's no excuse, right? No excuse for the yelling and the frustration and all this kind of stuff. To that I say, if you like open your empathy bottle just a little bit more and put yourself in the shoes of the person that's receiving actual threats, documented. If whoever was called a fucking chink and go home, and I tried to emphasize that in the video, that's the thing that we hear the most is go home. Go away, go back to where you came from. You're not welcome. We hear that more than anything. If you remember, if you take anything, if there's room in your empathy bottle for anything, it is a spirit that comes at us PSCs that wants us to go away. Maybe you don't want it, and maybe you don't see it, you don't experience it, but you got a glimpse, and that's the tip of the iceberg. We have some work on our side. Some of us have some work to do in terms of expanding our empathy bottles and, encompassing other people. So it's like, I try very hard to have as much empathy as I can for the DT side. But relative, I know where most of my empathy bottle is going. And I try to invite anybody to just make a little bit of space for the other side. I think they might go a little bit better. less spills of empathy. So that opens up a question: how do we grow empathy bottles? How do we make space for others? And so my short answer to that is believe and engage with and ally with something bigger than yourself. Engage and ally with something that provides a multi-perspective experience, multicultural, just diversity in general, something that it pitches that big tent that I talked about in the last episode. That will challenge you just, directly right there. It's hard work. It's hard work to really see and engage with somebody who is different from you. But in that engagement, in that back and forth, that bottle stretches and you can encompass more and more things. I'm never a believer that the answer is to have less empathy. The answer is to grow and accommodate more empathy. So that's a short answer. I have a slightly longer answer, and I have to admit that I hesitate to give it because it does reveal something about myself. And in a way, I'm kind of outing myself, right? But, I like anyone who asks themselves, eventually this kind of becomes an important thing to just do and, put out there. So I am a Christian. I believe in God. I pray, I meditate. I'm pretty serious about this stuff. It's a very, very important part of my life. It is the thing before anything else that stretches me and challenges me to be as empathetic as possible. Love thy neighbor, love thy enemy. I really try to live that on the everyday. I acknowledge that Christianity has caused a lot of hurt, so I don't talk about it a lot in certain spaces. Also, I was a little bit put off because of a recent tweet by a notable board game personality who said something to the effect of, "Jesus is awesome, Christianity sucks." I know exactly where that came from. I know exactly what that spirit was, but that kind of broke my heart as someone who believes in this stuff and who tries really hard. I mean, because, you hear Christianity, what does that mean? Well, I mean, for me, I do it in a particular way. I'm a part of a Catholic tradition called Catholic social teaching. I'm kind of a lefty Catholic, so to speak. Liberation theology. If you don't know what liberation theology is, Google it. It is basically, though, a theology that lifts from below. God saves from below. God prioritizes the poor and the outcast and the widow and the orphan and the stranger and the outgroup. That has been a part of my spirituality for a very, 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 very long time. And so when it talks about my empathy bottle and how I challenge myself to stretch it, then I kind of have a lean. I admit it, I'm biased. My lean is towards people who suffer harassment, the outgroups. My lean is towards the gay Asian man who's getting threats. My lean is towards the autistic kid who is at the table and gets called retarded and has to separate himself. My empathy is towards the female streamer who is trying to play a game and, some jackass comes in and says, "What color are your panties?" Oh, can you believe that? Like, what the fuck, man? Let's get this together. What are we doing? That is where my empathy is. Does that mean that I can't have empathy for the other side? No, that's where my larger faith tradition comes in. But it doesn't have to be faith. It doesn't have to line up the way I do. And I guess I'll talk to my moderate friends over here with whom I disagree. It does not have to line up the way it lines up for me. I guess the only thing I'll say is look inside yourself and look inside your empathy bottle. Is it full or is there space, even for people who disagree, even for people who look like they're really mad, but behind that anger is something, and is there space in your empathy bottle to engage with it? Whew, whoa, that is a long episode, very tiring, and it was all in response to the comments from one video, so I wanted to respond in one place, even if it's a little bit long. Thank you so much for joining me on the journey. There's one little item of business left, and I didn't know whether I could say something, but I've been asked to, and I've tried my best to, put something out there. And that is just board gaming in general. So board gaming can be that bigger space. It can be the multicultural, multi-perspective space that challenges us, and by engaging with it, become like bigger, broader, more empathetic people by virtue of the fact we meet a lot of different people, right? It could be that, but right now, not going that great. It is split between prominent personalities who are at it's not going well, and there's other personalities that are just kind of like ducking their heads and hoping it all blows over. It's just not the kind of space that I think we all want. So I'm going to try to take the highest road that I can. I don't want to name any names. I do not play the shame game at all. I try very hard not to be shaming. If anybody is watching this video and kind of like, I can't predict what people will do off of my videos. Now that more and more people are watching it, I have to be more careful. I want to say right away, no shame in my name. No shaming the shamers. We do not respond to shame with just the same. I'm not about that at all. So I will try to take the highest road that I can by saying that I'm going to offer the title of the video. I would like to invite everybody to create a space of accountability and empathy. Accountability, that has to be in there because there are elements, and the elements are hey, look, I'll say it. The elements are on, a lot of different sides, but I think that the worst of it is in the hearts of people who want a monocultural space, who want the space to look and feel like they are used to. I think that's where the biggest energy comes from for various reasons. And so for those of us, for those in the community who are intolerant, for those in the community who harass and who think it's justified and okay, for those repeat offenders, for those who are truly intentional, and that comes out of all the repeated behaviors, for those people, I say, we don't need you. Go ahead and go in timeout. Think about what you did. We don't need you in this space. Point blank, full stop. But then there's the more difficult cases, right? There are where it's not a repeat offense. It's hurtful, but it's there's something going on there. Maybe they didn't intend to do it. Maybe they didn't mean to do it. Maybe there was a miscommunication. There's so many different areas of friction. And, it's not completely clear that it is true, like just intolerance and stuff that we just can't deal with anymore. Empathy. Try. It's such hard work, but try to at least check in with yourself and say, okay, is my empathy bottle full enough to at least understand what they're feeling? And if it turns out that, they're beyond the pale and they are really this, then that's fine. But let's not assume that. Let's work. Let's just try to get going in private conversations, Twitter, and just do the hard work of understanding where we're coming from. Because I feel like if we could just, kind of remember what we're doing here, remember that this is about gaming, and not like gaming in the frivolous way. I'm a big believer that we're not just playing games here. It's not just a game, but for the sake of that bigger ideal, that multicultural space, I think the hard work of case-by-case application of empathy and the hard work of seeing the process through, I think our bigger board game community is worth the effort. Stay tuned next week. I will have more. It will not be this comprehensive in terms of the responses to stuff. It's going to be in the area of multiculturalism, but much more kind of scientific and research-based. Some of the things that I'm doing, some of the reading I'm doing in psychology, to kind of understand more about what racism and, just intolerance is and how we can, kind of counteract that. So that's going to come up next week. Going to have a couple of videos on that, and then that will be it for my multicultural content. I know I'm not just keep on going. I'm looking forward to next month where it'll be a lot of games, some shelf help, get back to my mental health episodes, and all sorts of other stuff. So thank you so much for coming along on the ride. This is Jason reminding you, if you could change your mind, you could change the world. So until next time, make some good trouble.